So Prince Harry's latest public relations tour isn't the only thing that isn't moving the way everyone expected. Because inside Windsor Castle, a secret deal was just stopped at the very last second. Princess Catherine walked into a locked sitting room and caught Queen Camilla secretly plotting on a live video screen with Harry and Meghan Markle. The trap was already set. The terms were agreed, the secret deal was written, and Camilla was literally seconds away from closing a private deal with the California couple. But before that final promise could be made, Catherine entered the room and stopped the betrayal cold. Not with a polite knock, not with a quiet warning, and not with a soft request to talk later. The future queen stood her ground, demanding to know why a reigning queen was helping the exact people who tried to destroy the family. Before we unpack this whole mess, hit subscribe to Royal Affairs so you don't miss what comes next. Queen Camilla's confidence vanished when Catherine focused on the active screen. Harry and Meghan were still connected, leaving no credible way to dismiss what the princess had witnessed. The discovery was sudden, which somehow made it more devastating. Catherine wasn't asking for an explanation. She was witnessing a forbidden alliance play out in real time. Camilla looked down at the faces of the Sussexes on the encrypted link, then raised her eyes and said nothing. She had genuinely believed her authority as queen consort would keep her private arrangements hidden. Instead, the future queen had caught the layout of the plot mid-sentence. Silence was impossible after that. Catherine stood in the corridor outside the private apartments, completely alone with a truth that felt too heavy to carry. Her tears weren't just about the shock of a single afternoon. They were the result of years of keeping her composure while the family perimeter was repeatedly attacked from California. The princess didn't immediately call for palace aides, and she didn't send a formal message through secretaries. Instead, she walked directly to William's private study, closed the door behind her, and let the shield drop. William had been reviewing routine scheduling briefs, entirely unaware of the crisis unfolding just a few doors away. He looked up to find his wife visibly shaken, the signature composure she had maintained through years of public pressure completely gone. Catherine didn't use soft language or cushioned phrases to deliver the blow. She looked directly at her husband and told him exactly what she had seen on that encrypted screen. Queen Camilla, actively negotiating a private pact with Harry and Meghan. The future king stopped listening, his hand freezing over his desk as the reality of the betrayal settled into the room. For William, the shock arrived as a brutal physical realization. The boundaries he had spent years enforcing to protect his family and the crown hadn't just been bypassed, they had been opened from the inside by his own stepmother. Catherine's words stayed with him as the initial numbness turned into a clinical, focused anger. She warned him that silence would become consent the moment Camilla's secret arrangement became permanent. It wasn't about whether they wanted a family conflict. It was about whether inaction would make them complicit in something that could damage the future reign forever. William realized that secrecy had been essential to Camilla's entire plan, which is such an interesting detail because it suggests the alliance hadn't just been a rushed mistake. It had been intentionally protected from challenge. Like if a pact with Harry and Meghan was straightforward and appropriate, why was it being hidden from the heir to the throne? William understood the emotion too. He wasn't blind to it, but he feared the precedent. The prince knew that every private arrangement made now could become a burden during his own reign. A royal alliance wasn't simply a valuable asset. It was a trust held by the crown for official use across generations. William understood that confronting his father could cause lasting damage to the family, yet allowing the agreement to proceed would place an even greater burden on his future reign. With that concern hardening into resolve, he prepared to challenge Charles directly. Camilla sat alone with a preliminary strategy plan open before her. She studied the marked notes, then folded the document and returned it to its folder. Her anger was real, but fear ran beneath it. Catherine's intervention had exposed the truth she had tried not to face. Her security might last only as long as Charles remained strong enough to guarantee it. That's a terrifying position to be in, and it explains why the Sussex alliance mattered so much to her beyond just status or comfort. Catherine had understood that danger before the confrontation began. During their private conversation in his study, William admitted that challenging his father could cause lasting damage to the family structure. She didn't tell him what to do. Catherine reminded him that delaying the confrontation would give Camilla enough time to finalize the arrangement. That warning guided William as he left the study and headed toward his father's office. Months earlier, Charles had made Camilla a personal promise after she confessed her fear of being left without a secure royal home or protection once his reign ended. He assured her that she would always be protected. Her quiet contact with Harry and Meghan was intended to secure that promise. Princess Anne knew that William's demand had awakened an older warning, one Charles never realized his mother had preserved. The crisis didn't begin with Catherine's hand resting on the heavy wooden handle of that closed door. It began years earlier during a private evening at Windsor, when the late Queen summoned Princess Anne after a remarkably tense family dinner. No courtiers remained in the room. No public announcement followed. Yet before the Princess Royal left her mother's presence, the monarch had made one instruction unmistakably clear. Relationships and lines of communication attached to the sovereign's office were never to become personal trading chips for family security, no matter who sat on the throne. The distinction mattered more than anyone at that dinner understood. Privately held family relationships could be managed quietly, but an official line of communication to the crown was different. It existed to protect the integrity of the institution, and its consequences extended far beyond one single reign. The late Queen feared that once those boundaries were weakened, personal desperation could quietly become permanent institutional obligation. Anne had listened without interrupting. Her mother hadn't spoken with bitterness, nor did she attack Camilla. Instead, the monarch asked her daughter to remember one unyielding principle: loyalty must never be confused with survival. The Princess Royal understood that this wasn't casual advice. It was a warning preserved for a future crisis, and that exact warning had been triggered the moment Catherine walked into William's study with tears in her eyes. Now the hidden record had become impossible to ignore. Anne placed the certified record of that past conversation directly before William and explained its origin. The future king read the documented warning twice, closed the folder, and refused to let palace officials carry the upcoming confrontation for him. With the late Queen's principles in his possession, William walked toward his father's private office, knowing that a single confrontation could permanently alter the family layout. There were no advisors between them when William returned to the king's office. Charles stood beside the desk with the daily dispatch boxes still open, while Catherine stood quietly near the window, her presence a silent testament to the betrayal that had started it all. Her face was calm now, the initial tears replaced by a cold, unwavering resolve. William entered carrying the communication log and the late Queen's recorded directive, closed the door, and placed the pages directly beside the king's open papers. What followed wasn't a constitutional lecture. It was a direct confrontation between a father determined to shield his wife and an heir refusing to inherit the toxic consequences of that protection. William spoke first. He told Charles that the internal communications of the crown belonged to the monarchy, not to any one marriage, reign, or private arrangement. They were supported through official structures, which meant that any parallel network opened with Montecito directly tied the hands of the future sovereign. That made Camilla's secret video calls more than a private family matter. It was a choice that would bind those who came after them. Charles didn't retreat. The king argued that as sovereign, he held absolute authority over his household's family diplomacy. He insisted that Camilla's communication with Harry and Meghan was an attempt to stabilize a fractured family, not weaken it. In his mind, he saw a path to peace. William saw a dangerous compromise that couldn't easily be reversed. The prince pushed the log of unmonitored calls back across the desk, looking directly at his father. You cannot trade the security of the crown to buy peace in the family. Charles's expression changed at once. He accused his son of confusing institutional guardianship with flat disobedience. William answered that loyalty didn't mean maintaining a silent compliance while the perimeter was breached. The future king refused to inherit a court where structural boundaries were rewritten by emotion and then defended as private family diplomacy. Queen Camilla entered the office before either man could continue. She had learned through an aide that her entire future was being debated behind a closed door, and she refused to remain on the outside of it. The queen consort walked past the open dispatch boxes, looked directly at Prince William, and asked whether he truly believed she had earned nothing but suspicion after years of quiet service. Her voice carried the weight of her hidden anxieties, but it met a wall of absolute resistance. William chose his words with clinical precision. Service could earn public respect, dignity, and the protection of the court, but it could never buy the right to run a private foreign policy with the Sussexes. Camilla heard the distinction, yet it struck her as a direct public rejection. To her, the future king wasn't defending a structural protocol. He was reminding her that her acceptance within the house still had strict, unyielding limits. Then William turned the late Queen's documented directive toward his father. King Charles recognized his mother's sharp handwriting before he even reached the final sentence of the text. He sat down slowly, visibly shaken by the sudden knowledge that the previous monarch had anticipated this exact crisis years before it played out. The instruction was clear: no unmonitored alignment or parallel communication channels with non-working royals could occur without collective consultation and recorded family approval. Charles immediately understood who had preserved the record. His anger shifted instantly toward his sister, calling Anne's long silence on the matter a deep betrayal of his confidence. Still, the king refused to surrender his authority on the spot. He left the communication logs on the desk but ordered the entire dispute placed before the family's private council. The secret alliance had been stopped mid-sentence, but the battle was no longer confined to a single sitting room. Once the issue entered the council chamber, the debate had to disguise itself as formal procedure. Every chair was occupied. Every security log was numbered, yet beneath the polite language sat the exact same dangerous question. Could the sovereign use institutional power to satisfy a personal family promise? Charles opened the discussion with a controlled confidence, believing the room would ultimately defer to his status. William believed his grandmother's final mandate would prevail, while Catherine sat silently, knowing the outcome would define the true perimeter of her future reign. The positions formed with brutal clarity. Several senior officials suggested a loose compromise, a monitored channel that would allow Camilla to maintain contact with California under strict oversight. William and Princess Anne rejected the wording immediately, refusing to accept any clause that left a back door open to Montecito. Prince Edward searched for a middle path, one that would protect the Queen Consort's personal dignity without weakening the structural boundaries around the Crown's media strategy. Charles listened as loyalty began to separate from blind obedience. Each speaker addressed him with profound respect, but respect did not translate into support for the secret pact. The king tapped one finger against the table as another objection was raised, then noticed William watching the gesture, and his hand became completely still. The future king said nothing. He didn't need to. His silence carried the pressure of everything that had already passed between them in the private office. The chamber tightened further when a critical clause in Camilla's private strategy was uncovered. The original arrangement with the Sussexes would have placed long-term media management, public relations coordination, and damage control under hidden family coordination, even if Harry and Meghan continued to launch public broadsides against other members of the family. What had been presented as a simple family check-in now looked like a permanent obligation imposed on the future of the court. That's the detail that changes everything. It wasn't just about who was talking on a video screen, it was about who got the bill for the reputational damage, potentially forever. William finally offered a compromise. He supported Camilla's full access to family communication during Charles's reign, with complete dignity, protection, and household support. But once that reign ended, all institutional lines of communication would return automatically to unrestricted crown control, with 0 legacy channels left open to California. His proposal proved that he wasn't trying to drive her into isolation. He was trying to stop a temporary panic from becoming permanent family law. The council remained divided. Charles couldn't simply impose the secret pact against the late Queen's written directive, but he could withdraw it, amend it, or defend it until a final family rupture occurred. Every voice fell silent as the king reached for the original communication logs. Charles had entered the chamber, determined to fulfill his promise to shield his wife. But the operational realities hidden inside that promise now forced him to choose between protecting Camilla's private anxieties and protecting the raw authority he would leave to William. The decision reached Camilla before the official palace briefing was prepared. she would be permitted to communicate with family members under the oversight of the sovereign's private secretary. But her parallel, unmonitored channel with Harry and Meghan would not become a permanent fixture of the court. No future entitlement would be guaranteed. No private pact would survive the current reign. The distinction looked highly technical on paper, yet when she heard it spoken aloud, Camilla understood the emotional verdict immediately. She could inhabit the role of queen consort, but she could never possess the independent power to rewrite the family layout. Charles had withdrawn his defense of the original proposal and accepted William's revised arrangement. The queen consort would receive full protection, staffing, and institutional backing during the reign, but control over the family's media boundaries would remain strictly with the crown. What had once been envisioned as a permanent, independent shield had been reduced to monitored permission, and that difference cut deeper than any public statement could admit. The consequences began at once. Aides froze the updated communication protocols. Staffing appointments for Camilla's personal media team were swiftly reviewed. Documents describing a relaxed stance toward the Sussexes were recalled and completely rewritten. Every alteration made the decision feel more final, because each correction removed another trace of the certainty Charles had tried to give her. Camilla sat alone with the unused keys and the closed communication log on the table. She didn't throw them aside, and she didn't summon an aide. When the king entered the private drawing room, she looked at him and asked only one question: "Did you ever have the power to promise it?" Charles couldn't answer immediately. The silence in the room exposed everything. He finally admitted that he had promised certainty because he wanted to erase years of rejection and insecurity. The monarch had believed that giving her a permanent, independent shield would prove that no one could push her aside again. Camilla listened, then told him that a promise made without the structural power to keep it had offered comfort at first, but humiliation in the end. William soon learned how she had interpreted the final layout of the compromise. The prince was told through a private palace briefing that Camilla believed he and Catherine had used rigid procedure to define her publicly as a temporary figure. That accusation unsettled him. He had protected the institution, but he now understood that a victory on paper could still leave a wound powerful enough to poison the family dynamic for years. Catherine responded before the internal damage could harden. In a private written message sent to the queen consort's apartments, the princess explained that the confrontation had never been intended to remove Camilla from royal life or strip her of her dignity. She acknowledged the distinct cruelty of belonging to a system where every home, title, and line of communication had strict legal limits. Camilla read the message twice but sent no reply. Instead, she requested a private meeting with William. No Charles, no advisors, and no prepared statements. When William entered the private drawing room, he found Camilla standing beside a cold fireplace with no aides or folders between them. She didn't ask him to reverse the council's vote. Instead, she asked whether he had ever intended to let her feel secure within the monarchy. His answer would determine whether the dispute ended as a constitutional correction or hardened into a personal rupture that neither Charles nor the crown could repair. William didn't dismiss her fear. He admitted that he had often treated her role as a political reality rather than a human one, focusing on rules and inheritance while ignoring what it meant to live beside a crown that offered status one day and complete uncertainty the next. He explained that he couldn't give her unmonitored control over crown communication, but he accepted that her future safety shouldn't depend on shifting family loyalties. William didn't dismiss her fear. He admitted that he had often treated her role as a political reality rather than a human one, focusing on rules and inheritance while ignoring what it meant to live beside a crown that offered status one day and complete uncertainty the next. He explained that he couldn't give her unmonitored control over crown communication, but he accepted that her future safety shouldn't depend on shifting family loyalties. The council's arrangement had protected Camilla only during Charles's reign, leaving her long-term future unresolved. William now offered to support a privately funded lifetime arrangement, secured through personal royal resources rather than crown property. This solution would protect her independence after Charles's reign without limiting the authority of future sovereigns. With her deepest fear finally addressed, Camilla agreed to endorse the council's decision. By morning, the private dispute had escaped the palace walls, and the public appearance arrived to test the new layout. Charles entered the state reception with Camilla beside him and William and Catherine one step behind. For a brief moment, the king stopped, turned toward his son, and invited him and Catherine forward to stand in alignment. The gesture was small, but its meaning was unmistakable. William had challenged his father's decision, yet he hadn't tried to take his place. He had protected the place itself. Do you believe William made the right decision, or should Camilla have been allowed to keep direct contact with Harry and Meghan? Share your opinion below, and subscribe to Royal Affairs for more stories from inside the palace.